Step 7, metal bending. In this step, I'm going to teach all the different methods I have for bending spoons. I'm going to start out with the in the palm bend, I'm going to show you the karate bend, and the matrix bend. All my latest different ways that I have developed to bend spoons right in front of people's eyes. You're going to love this. I'm Richard Osterlin. I'm a mentalist. I use abilities we all have, but sort of in a special way. And to try to create a little mystery, a little wonder for you. Hope you enjoy it. I want to begin by showing you something. You know, the first time I did this, I was just thinking about this. The first time I did this was the very first year Fox and Friends was on TV. I was on the show. It was the first time I did this back in the 1990s. Some spoons, check them out. And, you know, since I started doing this all these years, people have come up and said, you have some kind of trick spoons that you use? And, no, they're just heavy-duty solid spoons. As a matter of fact, there was one place I used to work at when I lived back in the East Coast. Every year I would do a show for a group called the Hartford Leadership Council. And they would actually wait for me to come every year to bring me spoons that they had looked for all year long. Give me one of them, anyone that... This one? Okay, fair? Because I'll use a different one if you want. Okay, now if you've ever seen this before, you see guys rub a spoon like that and make it bend. You've seen that happen before. My whole career, what I've always wanted to do was to make it happen visually so you can actually see it, okay? Are we good to go? Yeah. Okay, watch. Look at this. Watch. Now I want to show you that this is not an illusion. Can I have another one here to show you that they were all lined up before? You can see how much it's bent. You know, here you go. My whole life I've been interested in karate and the martial arts and that type of thing. They call the force when you hit a board to break it or a brick, they call that ki or chi, depending on, Chinese or Korean karate. It's like that, but without the contact. Watch. What's your name?
Vanessa.
Come on up here, Vanessa. Give Vanessa a big round of applause. Right there is fine, Vanessa. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Just, would you stand right here just for a second? We want to try something. Face me. Okay, just hold this spoon with 2 fingers on top and your finger underneath. Now, not too tight, not too loose. I'll try to bend it while you're holding it. You tell me if you can feel it going. Ready? Loosen up a little bit, okay?
Okay.
Ready? Now, do you feel it? Mm-hmm. Right where you're holding it?
It's moving.
Yeah. Look at this now. Thank you. Give Vanessa a big round of applause. Do you remember the movie The Matrix? In the movie, they did something like this. They used a camera morphing effect. No camera tricks. Watch. Crazy, huh? Look at that. My daughters are growing up now, but when they were a little bit younger and were out dating, and the guy would be over the house, and I'd say, come home by 11 o'clock. And then I would do this for him. And I would say, now imagine what I could do to your internal organs. As soon as I do this, you know what? Hold your hand out, your right hand. I notice you're not wearing any rings or anything, so nothing can get damaged. Hold it like this flat. I'm going to bend this through your hand. Is that okay?
Okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll hold it just like that, your finger up, and nice and flat. Okay, what's going to happen, you're going to feel some heat here. You might feel a tingling sensation too. Ready? This is crazy. Right through her hand, right through her flesh. Watch. And you feel the heat, right? Yeah?
Yeah.
Right in your palm right there?
Yeah.
Look at how much now. Shit. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, but that's okay. When they swear, then I know if they like me. As soon as I mentioned the Matrix, of course, everybody says, well, can you make it go back like in the movie? And well, no, it's not like that. It's not like a camera trick. I can force it back like this. But once I take and bend a spoon and straighten it out again, it fatigues the metal. Do you know what I mean by that? Like if you take a coat hanger and you go over and over, eventually it will actually break. And if I bend the spoon and then straighten it out again, it fatigues the metal. And sometimes I can do this. Look at. Oh, wow.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Did you see that? It's actually done like a 180 all the way around there.
Yeah, probably still use it.
Yeah, you probably could, yeah. Here, I'll tell you what, I'll trade you. You can take this one, bring it home, keep it, share it with your family. A lot of people say to me, how'd you learn how to do this stuff? Well, Yuri Geller was the first guy who started doing this, and I would watch him on TV and say, I got to do that. And every night I'd watch TV with a spoon in my hand, just rubbing it. And one night I'm doing it, and I'm not even paying attention to the spoon. And all of a sudden, it started becoming like plastic or something. Just melting over. Here, you can keep that one. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Hi. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics in mentalism, metal bending. I just love doing metal bending. If you noticed the other night in my show, I began the show by bending metal. It's amazing to me how that can quiet down a crowd, even if it's a crowd that is looking at you like they're not quite sure how to take you, if you're real or not. All of a sudden you start doing this and the whole mood changes. It exhibits power, and that's the thing about metal bending. As I was saying earlier in my discussion of mentalism in general, the thing about mentalism that makes it so much different than magic is mentalism seems to show powers the way they would actually be if you really could do what you claim you could do, read minds or what have you. Magic very rarely does that. You don't see magicians doing the kinds of things that you would expect someone who really had magical powers to do. However, when it comes to metal bending, you do. Because metal bending, being able to cause something made out of metal to bend over on itself or just warp and what have you, well, that's a pure form of power. I often say in my lectures, do you remember, I remember when I was a kid and I used to watch the cartoon shows on Saturday morning, and sometimes, somebody would read a book, one of the characters like Mickey Mouse or one of the Disney characters read a book, How to Become a Magician, read it, and now they've become a magician, and they would go like this, and like lightning bolts would come out of their fingers, and they could hypnotize somebody or blow up something or something like that. It was power, and that's what metal bending is all about. It looks like power, and it can look so good that can be almost awe-inspiring. So with that kind of introduction, I want to explain to you how I approach this and how I achieve what I think looks pretty good. To begin with, before I even talk about bending spoons, I have to talk about something I wrote about in a book years ago called Making Magic Real. And that is the idea that if you can believe so strongly in your magic, your own magic, that you think it's real, you honestly believe it's real in your own mind, your audience can't help but believe it's real. And the trick is, how do you convince yourself that something is real, actually feel like it's real, feel like you're really doing magic? And one of the tricks that I came up with was to use ideomotor action, and I used the haunted key as an example of how to develop this. when most people do the haunted key, and of course I'm a little higher here than I normally am, but that's okay. I've seen it taught different ways. This is a standard haunted key. You put it in your palm. If you want it to turn over, I remember one guy used to pretend like he was turning it like this and would just lean forward and let the key go over like that. Other people taught, well, you could flex your muscles and make the key go over by flexing your muscles. The idea I proposed in Making Magic Real was you set the key down on your palm and you actually try to mentally cause the key to turn over, using your left hand at the same time, as though you were causing this to happen by the power of your mind. Watch. See, just trying as hard as you can not to think of anything physical, but to think of making this key move on its own by causing your own mind to make the key move like this. See? And if you look at my hand when I'm doing this, you won't see any flexing muscles or anything like that because it's all taking place in the mind. See? You gotta make it go back a little bit too, or forward, like this. And then finally down all the way. Now, at no time when I was doing that was I thinking of moving my hand around, just forcing it with my mind, thinking of it with my mind to go that way. Of course, I'm moving my hand, I'm moving my muscles, that's what's making it do that, but I'm not aware of it. I feel myself like it's my mind power that's causing this key to turn over like that. It's a great exercise. I'm sure most of you watching this have a haunted key or even a real key, skeleton key that you can use like a haunted key. Just lay it on your hand, just get it to the point where it's ready to turn, and just start thinking. Just start thinking for it to move, to turn. Really will it over, like you're saying, even go will it back down again, you know, after it's going up somewhere, you can will it back down again like that. Practice that a while. Once you've gotten the hang of that, now we're ready to start talking about bending metal, bending spoons. Just so you will know, I now bring my spoons with me to a show. I know of a lot of people who claim, oh no, use their spoons, take their spoons off the table and bend them. I used to do that. I got in trouble a couple of times, I'll be honest with you. People just got mad, you know, and think about it. Why not? Especially, you know, if it gets to the point where you bend some spoons and somebody else wants you to bend a spoon to somebody else, and then people start getting nuts and they start bending them themselves and saying, you know, look at what I did, when in fact they just bent them by force. And before you know it, you know, you have 20, 30 spoons that are bent out of this restaurant, and they're not going to like that too much. So I bring my own spoons now. If somebody challenges me with a spoon from the venue that I'm at, a banquet hall or what have you, okay, fine, I'll use it then. But normally I just use the spoons I bring with me. There's no problem with that because people are going to examine them. You're going to give them away at the end to keep. So that how could there be any kind of gaff spoons involved if you give them away? People always say, well, you can't use your own stuff if, you know, or they'll think it's gaffed. Not if you give it away. You know, okay, you can't use your own deck unless you give it away at the end and they take it home. Then they know, well, there's nothing tricked about that. Same thing with the spoons. These are tablespoons. I don't like to use forks. I know Banachek likes to do that with the tines and everything. That's not my thing. I just like to use spoons mostly. I can use a fork, and I have used forks. And there's one effect I do where I call it the cutlery spray, where I have 3 forks and they bend and sort of spray out. But most of the time, 95% of the time, I just use spoons. And I use tablespoons because they're great big spoons like this. You can, they look substantial. These are fairly substantial. In case you're wondering what kind they are, I'll tell you. A while back, I came upon these spoons in a store in Kentucky, in Florence, Kentucky. They call it the Christmas tree shop, which is like a nice dollar store. They sell a lot of used stuff there. Not used stuff, but seconds or leftovers or what have you, but good stuff. And these spoons are Cambridge spoons. And as you can see from the tag, they were selling for $5.99 for 10 of them. So they're not as cheap as some that I've seen. $6 for 10 puts them, what, at 60 cents a piece. So they're not as cheap as some places, but they're not very expensive either, and they're well made. And I'm just trying to look for some kind of number. I bought a bunch of them, and I haven't seen them since then. But the thing you want to look for is something that's a substantial spoon. You do not want any kind of spoon with ridges on it. You see how these are kind of flat? Actually, these very closely resemble the silverware that we use in my own house, which is pretty expensive and good stuff. Both in weight, in size, and the way it's made. It's nice and flat. If you have the ridges on, as you know, anything that's got ridges, like a border around the edge, will make it harder to bend, and you don't want that. You want something that can bend fairly easily, and yet at the same time look substantial. And these are pretty substantial. It's not like you just look at them and they melt over. They're strong enough so that they look like standard flatware that you might see in restaurants and what have you. I've picked up spoons in restaurants. Sometimes they're stronger than this, sometimes not as strong. I've actually seen spoons in restaurants that were not as thick and heavy and strong as these. I always like to come out using 3 when I first walk out, and I always hold them up like this to show they're nice and nested. See, one of the beauty of bending metal is you really can't tell if something's bent or not. For instance, there's a sort of a little bit of a bend in here. If I put more of a bend in, you really can't see. It doesn't look much different, but now it's not quite the same as it was before. If I put this on the bottom, you see it's bent a little bit more than the other one. And yet you would be hard-pressed to see that visually between the 2 spoons. Even something a little bit more severe, it's still not quite that easy to see that bend, and yet look at how much it's bent now. You see it's bent quite a bit. And later, if I want to put a slight bend in and bend the spoons, I can always pick them up and compare them with one of the other ones, which is why I just said a second ago that when I first come out, I always come out and show them stacked. Because if I show them exactly the same in the beginning, then later when I hold them up, people will know that it has or hasn't bent. The basic way this almost always works when you bend a spoon is you're going to put a bend in it that the audience is unaware of, and then make it look like the spoon is bending or has bent while you're simply holding it. So to put a bend in, there are so many different ways, but let me show you some of the simplest ways. If you have a spoon in your hand like this, if this edge hits against your small finger, and you have your forefinger there, and you have your thumb over here, if you squeeze, you can put a bend in, like that. That's a pretty good sized bend. That'll work. And it all comes from this point here, and this point here, pushing down like that. Some people have more strength, some people have less strength. I've been doing this for years and years and years. I probably have a little bit more strength in my hands than most people do, and I can do this kind of easily. But, I'm no Superman. Plenty of other people can do this just as easily. If you find that you can't push that over, and by the way, that could be obvious if people are looking right at you. You need to cover that in some way or do something so people don't see it, or even drop it to your side and put it behind your back when you do that, or move it. Moving things around. One of the I'm going to sidetrack a little bit for a second. One of the problems that has arisen from all these magic videos that have shown up over the last 15, 20 years is that everything is filmed to be seen on your TV set in a small area, as though this is the whole stage. So it's gotten to the point where even a lot of routines are developed to only take place in a small area. Close-up pads are made this big. A lot of routines like coin matrix routines are meant to be done in a small area, and card effects. And yet, in real life, especially if you're on stage, your working area is much, much bigger. So you may be tempted to try to develop bends on the spoons that can be done with this in this little area here, when in fact on stage, You could be moving around doing this kind of thing, and you could do all kinds of things that can't be detected, like I just did, because of the movement alone. I could take this spoon that's straight now, and I could just move it like this and back, and I put a bend in it, and you see just the movement going back and forth can cover that. I'm just saying that that's one way you could do it. You could take, and you could actually put it against your leg or your body and push it in as you turn this side to the audience, behind your back. You could simply take and just bend it against your body or your leg. That's a possibility too. You can do this move, which is what was in an older book about Uri Geller, and I got this book maybe 30 years ago, and it's a great move. And here's the move. It looks like you're simply holding the spoon here, lightly, gently rubbing it. You come around here, and you're gently rubbing it some more here. And now you're all ready to make the spoon bend because it's already got a big bend. And it's almost impossible to see. I'll show you the exact moves, how it works. You're lightly rubbing here, like this. You come around, you do a similar move to that I just taught, where the spoon hits here, and this is the fulcrum, but instead of your thumb up here, you use this hand. And as you come around, this hand pushes in and you bend, but as soon as, so it's now bent, but as soon as you get back here, this hand is loosening up and gently rubbing. So it looks like the whole time you've been doing this, it's the most gentle rub. And see, this hand is now blocking the handle, which you can see is greatly bent over. So the whole move is, there it is, like this, just gently rubbing like this. Come around here, just gently rubbing, see? Gently rubbing, but it's got this big bend in it. And it looks like the whole time I've never applied pressure anywhere. So that's a way you might want to consider doing it. One more time, real slow motion. Gently rubbing, come over here, bending, over here, gently rubbing, spoon is concealed, and then you can either hold it here and make it bend like this, or maybe take it and make it bend like this. I'm going to show you how to make it look like it's bending a lot of different ways. But for right now, I just want you to see different ways that you could put bends into a spoon. So this is one of those things where the best practice is to stand in front of a mirror and just hold the spoon, rub it, see what looks good as you look into the mirror, see if you can notice something happened or not. You can take a spoon, see if you hold it this way on to the audience like this. And if you're just like rubbing it like this, you could put a bend in. And it's really kind of hard when you're flat onto the audience to see that this is bent. But it's quite a bit bent, see? This is the way it started out, like this. And then by rubbing it like this, you can rub it like this, just stroke it. And you could put a bend in, and it's hard to see, but there's quite a bit of bend in. One of the neat things, like I said, about bending silverware is it's hard to tell how much it's bent. And if you hold it the right way toward the audience, they can't even begin to see a lot of times how far it has bent. Another thing, too, you want to know is that the further down the handle you can put a bend in, the better. It never looks very good if you bend it right here near the bowl of the spoon, because it just looks like the bowl has bent over. But if you put a bend down here, further down the handle, it really enhances how it looks when the spoon apparently starts bending. As a matter of fact, I'm going to begin by teaching you the first bend that I do, and it's a bend that I use right in my hands. Let me give you a little history and a little background so you know where some of this stuff came from. When Uri Geller first came around and was making headlines all over the world by bending metal, you never saw the metal bend, hardly at all. Mostly what happened was he would hold it and he'd pass out spoons to the audience, and everybody try to help me think at the bend, and he would hold it and rub it like this and think hard for it to bend, see if you can get the energy going, and it would be like this for a long, long time. And finally, somewhere in there, he would bend it, and then it would be like, oh, look it, what happened? And he would hold it up and show, that this had bent. And for the longest time, you never saw it bend. Once in a blue moon, he would be holding a spoon like this, and he would be rubbing it and saying, it's going to go, I know it. Oh, look, right now, can you see it going? Can you see it? And you see it going just a little bit. And that was a big deal. That was a big deal. So most of the time, you never saw the spoon actually bending. You only saw that it had bent after he had been rubbing it. And a lot of time, you know, because you remember, Uri Geller, even though he did perform on stages in front of a lot of people, the situation was different. He was coming across as a real psychic who really couldn't control these powers all the time, and so the best he could do was hope that it would work and try to get everybody on his side to think and help him and rub these things and just concentrate real hard to really make it bend. And maybe it'll bend, maybe a little, a lot. You never knew when it was going to happen, how long it was going to take. You know, he dropped it down and no, it didn't work, you know, and pick it up and just, oh, wait, I think it's going. Maybe it's going a little bit. Yes, oh, look, and everybody would go crazy. Yeah, look, it's bent. And he would show it, you know, look how much it's bent, you know, that kind of thing. So that was basically the way spoon bending was back then. And I saw it on TV, and I wanted to start doing that in my own show. And I started working on this so many years ago, way back when Uri Geller was first around. Now, over the years, back then, I met a lot of people and discussed, you know, and I was always working on different things. One of the people that I met was a Japanese magician named Mr. Merrick. I mentioned him earlier in a different step. And Mr. Merrick was a big television star over in Japan. And he was always talking about Han power, power of the Huns, you know. And bending silverware was a big part of the show. A lot of it was spoons bending and then actually breaking, because he would take and just bend the spoons until they're almost ready to go, so that he could take it and almost shake it like that, and the spoon would slowly lean over and break off and fall down. I never liked doing that too much myself, because I've always been of the opinion I like to be able to do things the same every time I work. And I don't want to do something in a particular situation that later somebody else could say, can you do it again now? And I can't do it because I didn't set up anything, because I didn't take a spoon and work it until it was ready to break. I'd rather not do that and just restrict what I do to other things that I know I can do on the spur of the moment. So I never really took spoons and bent them over and over again and weakened them to the point, because you can do that if you're very careful. You can bend the spoon and straighten it out, and bend it and just fatigue the metal and straighten it out, and you can just do that. And you got to do it real slow, and even now it will take forever, because if you try to go too fast, what will happen is you'll snap it, or you put a big old mark in it and you can easily see it's not. But if you take your time and bend it slowly and just do this for the longest time, you can actually get it to the point where the metal is just about holding, and then you can take it and you can just work it and ply it, and finally it'll break off into two pieces. So you can do that, and a lot of what he did on TV was done like that. But I developed a method to visually bend the spoon, and the method basically that I developed was to hold the spoon like this, and cause it to, actually it wasn't like that. I actually was holding the spoon like this and caused the spoon to bend upward like that. Now, you're watching this through the camera, you can probably see. By rubbing it over here, does it really look like the spoon is bending right now? Bending upward, you see? What happens is I've got a little bend that I put in there somehow or another, you know, secretly. And now I'm holding it like this. You notice my forefinger blocks the bowl of the spoon, so that you can't see it doing this, because the bowl of the spoon is blocked by my forefinger. So all you can see is the end. So if I do this, then you see the end rising up, see? And it looks like it's bending. So I did that for Mr. Merrick one time. And then he came over my house about a year later, and he had a new TV special on. And on the TV special, he had a spoon, and he had taken a spoon something like this, and held it on his hand like this, and then the spoon did this. And it was like bending upward. And I couldn't believe it. I was watching the TV special, and it was like, how could you do that? And he started laughing. He was telling me this basically was the bend that I showed him a year earlier, but he adapted slightly for a TV show. Well, I took it back and adapted it some more. I didn't like this business. That looked kind of, so I put it here instead. And now the bend looks like this. And I actually did this on a My Mysteries DVD. The bend looks like this. If you watch carefully, it looks very strong. You see? The thing is just bending up like that. Now let me show you what's happening. Of course, there's a bend already put in it. And again, this is why I say the further down the stem or handle of the spoon you can put the bend, not up here, but down here, the better it looks, because then it looks like it's sort of like just curling up. See? You see how it looks like the very end of it is just like somehow going up by itself. It just looks so much better when you can put that longer bend in. And just for the record, you could have one pre-bent, and you can, in fact, hold these up and make them look like they're nested, see? It's really like that. But if you hold it like this to show them, it still looks like they're nested perfectly. So let's say, for instance, you actually have one that's pre-bent, and you just say, okay, look at, I have these spoons, and, they nest perfectly. And then you take the bent one and you say, watch, and then it bends like this. And then, see, after it bends, you can say, look how much it bent, see? Without doing anything, without putting any bends, just having it bent like that ahead of time. Now, the reason, well, let me show you why this looks so good. If you hold it like this, see what's happening is I'm sort of pulling back like this with my thumb to raise it up on the end. Now, if I did it from this side, that would look, you would see the bowl of the spoon tilting down like that. But if I do it from this side, you can't see the bowl of the spoon. All you see is the end, and so I can just, actually I'm not even putting my thumb here. I put my thumb up here, but I squeeze backward like this. That's what's happening. I'm just kind of pulling backwards. So it looks like this when I'm, and see, what makes this look so effective is when you put this against your palm, so it's parallel. So now your palm has a reference point. So when it starts bending up, you can see how it's bending up because the way your palm is has a reference point. Your palm's straight, now it's bending away from your palm. And the fact that it's like going up like that looks pretty uncanny too. And then you can show it. So this is really the same bend almost as this. The first one I showed you earlier, except now you're holding it like this and it's against your palm. And this looks very, very strong. And that's a little aside. Sometimes when I get ready to do this, I actually take off my wedding ring and set it down and then do it. I don't say anything when I do it. I just do it. Or take off my watch and set it aside. And I can see people later saying, you see him take off his ring or his watch. He's probably afraid he's going to bend it, But I don't say that. But they say it. And that's better when they say it because it shows that, that's the kind of thing they're thinking of. So this bend, let's call this bend number one. This is the one I love to do this because you can do it with people really burning you all around, and it just looks so strong. And what happens, like I said, is usually you get this far and they say, what? And then I usually hold it up and say, no, it's not an illusion. Look, it's really bending. You can see how much that's bent. And that just flips people out. Now, that's the initial bend. There's another initial bend, and that's the one I did at the show, and that's on my palm. This was a later development after developing this one. Now, another newer initial bend that I've been doing for a number of years, a fellow named Dan showed me, and I adapted it slightly, but it's the in the palm bend, and it just looks so spectacular because it looks like you just lay the spoon in your palm and it bends up. And again, it's necessary to put a little bit of a bend in, not a lot of a bend, but enough so that when you lay it down in your palm, it looks like it's flat. See, it's a really cool thing. Because your palm is not straight, and if you curl it a little bit, you can lay the spoon in, and it looks perfectly flat. but it's not. It's ready to go because I've put a little bend in it already. Not a lot, but enough to really look fantastic. So it's setting here. The part where it's going to bend upward is right about here, and that's like right at the base of the fingers. You have to play with it a little bit. Watch me do it and play with it, and then you get the knack of just where to set it in your hand. But this is how it looks. Watch. Tell me if that doesn't look so good. It looks like it's bending, and how could it possibly be bending? Because nothing seems to be moving, and yet there it is bending. Even bends a little bit more, and then I can take it and show it. Okay, obviously nothing has happened since the time I put it in my palm. What's happened, if you break it down, maybe it's this. I'm pushing up a little bit with my palm. That palm is straightening, so that's what's actually happening there, okay? But that doesn't look very interesting doing it that way, you see. What makes it look interesting is the acting. And again, this gets back to what I was doing before with the haunted key. It's like you do this, and you start, I just concentrate on the spoon and just look at the end. I don't think about straightening my hand. I just think about that coming up, bending like that. And it just, I just automatically straighten my hand and do what I need to do to make it bend up. So it's the acting, it's the believing, just like with the haunted key. It's the same thing. It's like, and it just looks totally uncanny because look at it. How can there be a trick there? It's just lying on the palm, and there it is bending upward, just like that. If it's already bent quite a bit and I want to bend it a little bit more, if you tilt your hand up a little bit like this, it actually allows you to go even a little bit more because of the way the spoon's balanced. So then I talk and I show it. And this is very effective, of course. It's bent quite a bit compared to the other spoons, if you were to show it like that. This one's bent too. I'm sorry, this is a straight one. You can see how much that's bent, and that's very impressive. So then after that initial bend, that's when I usually go into my karate bend. It's a move I've been doing for years, and I really love it. I talk about how I've studied karate my whole life, and how when you hit a board or a brick to break it, it's called ki or chi if it's Chinese karate, and you know, and how you, in making all these movements, and while I'm doing all that is the perfect cover to put another bend in the spoon. You see I'm making moves like this, and they're sort of like violent type moves, so it's easy enough to take it and just give it one of those while I'm talking about that, and as long as I keep it this way on to the audience, that's not really noticed since it's already bent to some degree, and so it looks like that's the way it was bent before. So then I hold it down here by the bottom, again, face onto the audience, and that's when I give it this. And there's always a pause, because in my head, it's always like if I did this, a bolt of plasma would shoot out of my hand and take a second or two to hit that spoon before it started bending over. So it would be like, see, then it would bend over like that. And what's happening here, and it's hard to explain, I think it's almost as though we had a fulcrum right here, and that's where it's bending. But I am concentrating on trying to make this bowl dip down without the rest of the spoon moving. And I try to do that by pushing up with my finger and down with my hand, but mostly it's just a concentration on the bowl. I can't break it down exactly because it's more like I'm just looking at it. You got to try this in the mirror to get it right. But I'm just trying to get it so that the bowl is moving, but somehow the rest of the spoon doesn't. If you can get it like this, watch. And then sometimes, to make it even doubly effective, in addition to pushing it over this way, I make it go sideways. So it's got two kinds of directions to it, multiple directions, and you get this effect, see? I'm going to do it this way so you can see it from the side. See, I get this kind of effect. So I do that a couple of times, and I really, really, again, am believing that I'm using forces in my hand to make this bend over. And then I show it, and then I talk about, this is the matrix bend that I always do in my shows. And I ask people if they've ever seen the movie The Matrix. And while I'm talking and again moving around, I put a pretty good sized bend in the spoon this time. I just did it, and now we're looking like this. Okay? Got that big a bend. Because what's happening is every time I'm bending the spoon more, and after I show it's been bent, I'm sort of one ahead. I put a bigger bend in before the next bend. But because each time I do it, there's more and more of a bend, the audience can't really realize how much it's bent before I bend it again the next time, especially when it's like face up to the audience. Now this, I call this the matrix move, because matrix bend, because it's just like in the movie. Watch this. Now I hope that looked good, as good on camera as I know it looks when I do it live in front of an audience. What I do, I've got it bent this much, I aim the end of the spoon above their eye level. And then when it starts to bend, and again, it's got to take a second, I got to concentrate for a second, then it starts to go. And then I let it pass over their eyes and then below their eye level. And that just looks like the thing is just like melting over, just like that. So that's the next bend I do. By the way, I should point out that anytime I want, in the course of doing all these bends, if I want to get somebody up and I've got a spoon that's bent like this already, and I'll have them hold on to the spoon with their fingers on top and their thumb on bottom, and then I'll just do this while they're holding it, and they will swear that it's bending right where they're holding it. I did this in the show. You can watch the girl holding it. Just make sure they don't hold it too tight or too loose, and just go like this, and you can actually feel it bending right where you're holding it if you're the person holding it there. Also, I believe I did it in the show last night. After it had been bent pretty significantly, I said to the girl, I'm going to bend it right through your hand. I think it was somebody else sitting there. And you have somebody hold their hand out, and you put this up against the back of their hand. You take this near the palm of your hand, and you just bend it like that through their hand. Now, this is how this works. It's pretty interesting. When they hold their hand up and you put this against the back of their hand, this is cold, and it's touching the back of their hand. The palm of their hand is very sensitive, and this hand, which is going to come against the palm of their hand, which is here, comes real close, and you get the heat from this palm against the palm of their hand. At the same time, the back of this is touching the back of their hand, and it's cold. So that amplifies the heat on the palm of their hand. And at the same time, you just bring it down like this, so it looks like the spoon is bending right through their flesh, as I put it, right through their hand. Like this is what it looks like without their hand. And now imagine their hand stuck in there, and they're saying, yes, I can feel the heat, because they can feel the heat from their palm against this, amplified by the coolness of the handle against the back of their hand. So now we're at the point where I've done the matrix bend, and it's really bent down this far. Now I usually do the twist. Now this is totally Banachek's move. Banachek showed me this move years and years ago. Since then, he's put it on DVDs. It's been on a metal bending DVD that we both shared together, that L&L put out, and other people have put it out. And I've asked Banachek, and I teach this in my own lectures, and he said it's okay. It's the way to twist a spoon, the way to twist a spoon, and what you need to do is it needs to get bent like really far down, like this, because you're never going to twist it. Instead, what's going to happen is you grab it here, and you grab it here, and you go like this. And then it puts a twist in it. Watch. You got to do it fast. You see? And now it's got a twist in it. Now, I actually do that. After I bent it, I say to the audience, I say, people, whenever I do this matrix bend, they also always say to me, can you make it go back? Because in the movie, that's what they did. And I said, well, no, I can't, because it's not like a magic trick, but I can force it back. And I do the move, and I put the bend in. And see, if you do it right, you can almost hold it like that. It doesn't look like anything's wrong. Just didn't go quite 180, but pretty close to it. Enough so that you can hold it in front of an audience like this and just say, okay. But sometimes if I bend the spoon and straighten it back out again, it fatigues the metal, and I can do this. And once I'm at this point, I just take and I hold the spoon like this. I'm just holding it like this with my right hand. What's going to happen is I'm going to do this. I'm going to just squeeze it and turn it like this with my thumb. Okay? But again, what's going to happen is I'm going to hold it like this in front of me, put my hand like this to cover it, and I'm going to start, and nothing happens at first, and everybody's kind of looking at me like wondering what's going to happen, and all of a sudden you see this happen, and it just looks weird, because nothing is cooler than just something moving by itself. And if you do it right, it doesn't look like you're applying any force or pressure with your hand, and it's just like turning around on its own. And finally, when it gets all the way around like this, I usually just take and just drop my hand down like that and say, look. Because a lot of times people don't realize it's twisted. They think it's maybe just turned in my hand. But when they come up close and they see that it's actually turned, spun around 180 degrees, they usually flip out. It's like, oh no, I can't believe that. And then I show it around to some people, and then I finally hand it to someone and say, I want you to keep this as a cheap souvenir of the occasion. Take it home, please, and share it with your family. And give it to them like that, and that gets a big round of applause. And so that is the finale of the first initial bend. Then I usually do one more thing after this is all going on. And this is all based on the attention drop after I'm done. Because usually when I'm done with all this, people's attention will drop and they think I'm finished with bending spoons. But that's when I get one of the other ones back. Last night, I actually gave the spoon to someone who had one of the 2 remaining spoons in the audience, and I gave him the bent one and took the other one back. And as I walk back, I'm going to put a pretty severe bend in the spoon. So I just usually turn and just push it up against my leg or my thigh or whatever it takes to bend it. As I'm walking back, nobody ever notices because everybody's attention is dropped. And I turn around and I say, a lot of people say, how'd you get started? How'd you learn how to do this? Now, this is the situation. The spoon is severely bent, but I'm just holding it this way toward the audience. And I say, you know, after I saw Uri Geller bending spoons, every night I would go home and I would rub a spoon between my hands and watch TV. And one night I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just watching TV. And all of a sudden it's as though the spoon became like plastic in my hand. And all I'm doing is I'm just moving it like this, and just like letting it just droop down, you see? Making sure my thumb is not even touching it. So it almost looks like it's about ready to like fall over or break in 2 pieces. And it just gives the illusion that it's like plastic or something. And then I stop and I just hand that to somebody who's sitting in the front, and I say, here, you can keep that too. And that's the finale of my spoon bending routine. So at the end, one person's got a totally twisted spoon, this one's got a bent spoon, and this person's spoon is like usually not touched at all. But I leave it in the audience because almost always what happens is after the show, people come up and they want me to autograph the spoon, the bowl of the spoon. I used to think that was stupid until I found out that Uri Geller does that. People had spoons in their houses autographed by him and dated by him. So, yeah, I have a Sharpie and people come up and I autograph it on the bowl. And then sometimes this person will come up to me and say, can you bend this spoon for me? And that gives me the opportunity to do it again with a smaller group of people and bend their spoon, which always gets a great reaction because it's like sometimes people, I think that, well, maybe these are gimmicks, but this one wasn't. That's why I didn't pick it or something like that. So when I bend the spoon they've been holding all this time and either twist it or bend it like this, then that just has a really strong effect after the show. So that is my spoon bending routine.